Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Jake Swilly here with Atavus, and today we got for you um, some insight into the recruiting process is going to be our topic for today. One of the main things we like to discuss and one of our pillars here at Atavus is the power of sport. And when it comes to recruiting and life after high school athletics for these student athletes, the power of sport has a big impact in giving opportunities for student athletes to pursue their, both their academic careers and their careers past that and their athletic careers as well. And so this is one of the ways when it comes to the college experience and scholarships and the recruiting process that the power of sport really enables these athletes to pursue their dreams and aspirations after high school. And so that's what we're going to get in today. And to go through all that process, we have our own Scott Laigo here with us, who not only is our director of partnerships out here on the West Coast for us at Atavus, but he is the founder of the Student Athlete Advocates group out here in Washington. And, main thing of what they do, and I'll let him get into it, but main thing of what they do is really helping athletes understand the recruiting process and the necessary steps to go forward and pursue those opportunities and aspirations that they have. So, Scott, thank you for joining us today. If you could just give a little quick background more on yourself, let the people know who you are with Atavus, but also what mainly you do. Like I said, with student athlete advocates as we go into this discussion.
Perfect. The number one, thanks, Jake, for putting this together and getting this up and running and getting this thing done today. I know there's a lot of back work to this whole thing. So, Student Athlete Advocates was started in the early 2000s. Basically, the NCAA was changing the process. The process was to, basically, the bottom line was to get kids to be, justified to be the reason they're, at a college, university. So there became requirements of 2.3 GPA. They had to do an SAT, ACT sliding scale to be able to be college acceptance. That's not excluding the getting into the college, the university itself. We'll get farther into that down the road. But when I saw this, and then my time at the head football coach at Garfield High School, I just started seeing a certain situation that was going to come out about this. Number one, and this is not a shot on any of the counselors that do the work at the great high schools around the state, but I think they're just over inundated and their plates are really, really full. The average in the United States is 582 to 1 when you think of student athlete to counselor ratio in a public school setting. So, there's about 220 days in a year. So you do the math, if your kid gets a chance to see his counselor and really sit down and go through the whole thing, it can be quite daunting. And, again, a lot of the counselors may have ran, cross-country track in the 60s in Central Washington or something like that, or, 70s or whatever. And, they're just not up to date. And the one thing we know about the NCAA, from the work that you and I do with Atavus, things change quickly with that group, and things change pretty rapidly. So I just recognized kind of the layers of it. And, I had a student athlete that was going to have a chance to go to Eastern Washington. I went and saw the counselors. I started talking to them. This is going to age me when I say this. The Eligibility Center, which is now not the Eligibility Center, but it was the way you got into college. It was the mechanism that you had to use and go through. And so now it's the NCAA Eligibility Center. So you have to, go through this process. And when I went and talked to the counselors, again, not a disparage onto them, I started talking about core classes and sliding scales, and they were like, hey, we get kids into Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. What are you talking about sliding scales and eligibility centers and things like that? And they just didn't understand. So the bells went off in my head. And so that's how I started forming this thing. We ended up getting that young man to the Eastern Washington on a delayed offer. So it worked out well. It's the even crazier part of the whole story. It was so late in the process, they couldn't even get him a ticket. So the basketball coach and I both ponied up and we got him a bus ticket. He took the Greyhound over, and we'll talk more about his story a little bit down the road here in this segment. But it's a daunting process, and it's bring it to 2022. You can imagine in those 20 years how much things have changed, and we'll talk about more of those things that have changed in the last even the last 5 years. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's great to have someone like what you guys do out in the space, because that is a real, thing. I think you hit it right on the head. In terms of counselors, everyone thinks that they have, like I said, it's not a knock on them at all. There's just so many things that they have to deal um, with regular high school, with subjects and topics, the matters that come up. We're just getting kids through high school, and the whole population just trying to get to college, let alone now you add on the athletic part of it and the requirements that it entails there. So it's just more of a changing, more process, more of a workload on them. That's in a way is maybe not fair to them always, dealing with some schools. Washington, we're not the biggest state. Anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 or 2,000 kids in the schools. But you talk about even thinking nationally, some of these schools that are 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 people. Having the ability to really work with those kids to get them and understand that next part of the process is huge. So that's great what you guys are doing. I mentioned the nationally, and you're obviously from here. You work with a lot of students, athletes from this area. Are you guys just based in Seattle, or do you help anywhere kind of outside the Northwest area or go beyond that?
Yeah, we're primarily a Pacific Northwest, but West Coast. So I've helped kids in California, I've helped kids in Oregon, Idaho, Montana areas. So we would like to expand this thing farther. There are some national companies called NCSA that are out there. We'll talk about them a little bit later, not in a positive manner, but they're out there. But we try to be the antithesis of the other end of the spectrum. A lot of it for me personally, especially my time at Garfield, was about access and equity into the situation. A lot of kids don't realize. I mean, a lot of people don't understand. Those are major companies. You're paying $5,000 to be with them,
Mm-hmm.
and us, it's we're very reasonable. We can get in pricing later, but the bottom line is, I think it's important that these people have this information. A good time to probably touch it. Say this also. My stepson's a college football coach. He's at the University of Oregon now, but he's been from all the way from Division II all the way up to the major college Power 5 now. And so he's seen all different levels, and so he's explained to me a lot of situations that are out there, different things that are changing. He's shown me some really good programs that do a great job in the high school programs about promoting their kids, and he's shown some things that aren't so positive.
Mm-hmm.
So the spectrum that's out there. Think about a rural kid in the middle of Eastern Washington that doesn't have a good internet connection. Can he get to the eligibility center? Does he know the thing? Does his teacher know about the core classes? Do they know how to get to the eligibility center? Financial aid, all those things that are out there, let alone an inner city kid who just, it's a numbers game. I just saw a statistic last night. I was looking at some program that, I know we're strong and Atavus is strong down in Texas. One Texas program has 320 kids in its program, its football team. I mean, that's a lot of kids to be responsible for. Really, know which ones are going where and what they're doing and how that's going. So if you don't have a process in place, I think a lot of kids can get laid by the wayside. And again, it's the spectrum that we're talking about. There's a lot of kids that you and I mean, we follow this closely. We, all send each other back texts and things like that, laughing about, the sixth grader, he's going to be the next greatest thing ever. And, you follow him 6 years later, he's, washed and everything like that. And then there's this kid out of nowhere. He's a senior year. He ends up being 6'7", 300 pounds and runs like a deer. And he gets every major college scholarship and nobody knew about him. So that again is the spectrum. So many people are doing this early sports and thinking this is going to be the ticket. They're going to make it out. And some of those kids just, wash out. They get tired. They, I get that piece, but there's kids that are a lot of late bloomers, and the late bloomer situation is really the ones that we try to help, because to try to get in late on this process is really, really hard. And so, as we explain more to it, the parents wellness, why we talk about maybe getting into it really in the 8th grade.
Yeah, no, for sure. And a lot of those points you hit on, we're gonna touch on individually as we go through this episode today. But to get us started, you kind of mentioned it earlier. That probably includes a lot of the items you just touched on right now, but that personal story that you kind of alluded to earlier, can you just give more detail to that and how that kind of shows what you at SAA do and help kids as well?
So today, presently they call it an academic red shirt. And that's what this young man was. He was an academic redshirt. They called him then, the old school days. I know Jake will have a good laugh. There's Prop 48 kids. And so it means that they go to the universities. They have no affiliation with the program. They're just there. They're on campus. They're showing that they have the academic rigor to, succeed on a college, campus. So he had to do that for a year. When you think about that as an athlete, you cannot have any interaction with the football program. You can't practice. You can't do anything. And that's kind of a lonely moment, because that's really the athletics is kind of what got you there. And all of a sudden, you're just on that campus to learn, to show you can get there. He makes it. Long story short, he's senior year. He's on ESPN. He's playing at Appalachian State. He's in a semifinal football game. Ends up being a teacher out in the Kent School District. So, a huge success story of where his life, ended up being from where he is. Come to today, we call them academic red shirts. And so basically, what happens if you don't make the requirements, you're done. They call it 2.3 or take a knee. There is no real other way. And then we can talk about there. I mean, there's technically a way, but even at that requirement, going to the JC level, the academic requirements even go up a little higher. Right now, it's a 2.3 for high school. When you get to college and JC, then it becomes a 2.5 GPA that you have to have and qualify and get in and all those things. And it's just a much tougher process. And I understand the argument from the beginning that, hey, we're going to have these kids take athletic scholarships and take money from these universities. They need to be academically set to be able to, take another kid's space on this university. It's the way it's been done and the way it's set up. And historically, a lot of inner city schools aren't as good academically. And so now we're setting these kids up for failure. And, as we talk about the core classes on the sliding scale and how that kind of works, it'll make more sense to parents down the road here. But the huge success story with that young man and, kind of showed to me that the process that I put together in my head and talking to these people would help, counselors and coaches and kids be able to get to the next level.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason of why you guys, other reasons why you kind of start. You mentioned the counselors as the main reason, a big reason earlier, but another reason is the process and approach you take to it and why that may be different. Another reason why you started. Can you just explain maybe the other reasons of why you started SAA and the other companies out? I mean, we'll get more into it later, what sets you guys apart and stuff more, but just what are the other reasons that, made you want to start SAA and take the approach you guys have?
Yeah, it just became, to be honest with the bottom line, Jake, it was just about money. It's, it's $5,000, base packages from these major companies. And here's the inside secret, parents. You're basically, your kids put into a database and he just sits there, and if they can make a match, and they may get your kid to a scholarship, there is true. So I'm not taking that away from those companies. But the problem is that they're going to get you to a New Hampshire school in the corner of the United States that you can't even get access. You have to do streaming to maybe watch your kid play. You're up at 4 a.m. to watch them play at 7 a.m. I mean, it's crazy. And to say that you got a scholarship versus what we call it the 500-mile rule. We want you to look at schools 500 miles from your home, and it can be from all the way from Division I. So for you, Seattle is a good example. University of Washington, all the way down to at this point, we could talk George Fox, which I know you're an alumni of, Central Washington, which is Division II, Linfield, which is a really good Division III program down in the Oregon area, and the recent national champions, NAI, Southern Oregon. So there's a different levels and everything, and how they, what they can give you and what they can't do. We'll talk about kind of your experience here in a bit. But I mean, the bottom line is, use that as the barometer. Be 500 miles, because I guarantee you one time, and I know, Jake, I know you're going to know about this inside story. Sometimes things get a little rough in college. Sometimes
yes.
You go to the counter. You go to your food pantry, and there's only one thing left of Top Ramen, and you and Top Ramen, and it's 2 more weeks of school, and you're like, I got 14 days of eating with one Top Ramen. How's this going to happen? So having closeness to your family, being able to access people. Sometimes, I know this again, it's a misnomer for people. You get sick in college, and mom's chicken noodle soup is the best, and it makes you feel better so much quicker. And so being able to have access to that stuff is so important. Again, you could get a scholarship other side of the country. That is absolutely true. I'm not just disclaiming that, but it's a lot of those things. And, I think that, I know for you're a good example again. Your dad is a high school football coach. Mom probably liked sports and football. Probably wanted to see you play,
Yeah.
and that's important that they could just go down I-5 and go watch you play. But getting on a plane and going through all the stuff that you have to do to go do those things, it makes it tough for these parents. So think of it from the bigger picture. Look at all levels. Every level is not the same, and they treat you a little bit different on every level. So
Yeah, no, 100% agree there. That's, we'll get, like you kind of alluded to, I can talk about my story a little bit later, but one of the biggest things and factors for me when choosing a program to go to play football at was, can my parents easily and readily come watch me every weekend? And so, that shrunk um, the school in terms of the geographical location down quite a bit, but I was fine with that. They'd be able to drive in a car, like you said, down I-5 a few hours versus having to take a day trip to Montana where I had some offers from, or fly across the country. Now, if that's what you want and you have scholarships across there and you yourself is fine with it and your family's fine with it, then that's awesome for you. But again, I feel it kind of come down to, like I said, I think at first, and what maybe those other companies, like you mentioned, don't necessarily consider, they just want to get you the quote unquote scholarship that they said they would, and where it's at, who knows. But setting your parameters as a student athlete being recruited, I think is huge. For me, the geographical location was part of that, and making sure my focus stayed there versus, okay, yeah, I had scholarships in places all over, but do I really want to go there? No. So I think that's a great thing. You guys, like you said, help the 500-mile rule is something that really keeps those parameters and the focus in check when talking with these student athletes. And you mentioned it too. These other companies, it's practically a database they go into. They have so many people, and I think that numbers wise, people don't really realize how many, everyone has these aspirations of college athletics at all levels. But I don't think people realize just how small of a percentage actually make it to the next level. And part of that, there's, people think that, there's just D1 when in reality there's a ton of opportunities below that to explore. And I think that's really where you guys are also helping out too. So let's transition now and get more into the recruiting process of it all. And let's start with what I was kind of just talking about, but by the numbers. So the biggest thing, obviously, everyone wants to get a scholarship. But I don't think what people realize is that based on sport, there's only a certain number that a program can give out, and then also by level. And so just walk us through this chart right here. It's a lot of scholarships broken up by level and by sport. But just walk us through your interpretation of it and what you tell the student athletes and families you work with when it comes to scholarships.
right. Let's start off. And again, it's our presentation is called Know Your Numbers. So you have to start with the big number first. The big number is every year at the NCAA eligibility centers, about 1 million kids apply into the process to say that they're qualified to be a student athlete for a prospective university or college. From that, 48,000 kids receive probably a scholarship, rougher, up a couple thousand one way or the other every year. And then it kicks down to these numbers here. There's two factors to think about when you think about this. It's the level of the division. So let's use football for example. Division 1, 85. The F's, which is called FBS, which is the major college Power 5 programs, they can offer 85 scholarships. The next level is SCS, the Montanas, the Idaho States, the Portland States in this area, they can offer 63. They can also offer partials. So really, maybe they want to try to kick that to 70, and they only give their last 6 or 7. They only give half scholarships, and so that gives them to 70, which gives them a better number. But again, financially, that would cost you as the student athlete. And from there, the numbers keep going down. I know you and I will talk a little bit more about your central, time, but typically it's 36 full scholarships at the Division 2. But again, they can cut those down and cut those into pieces. I always like to use the analogy. It's a piece of cake, and they start slicing.
Yep.
And when they start slicing, and this is not a knock on the left guard, but I know my man Jake here was the running back, and I know the guy that gets the ball to Jake is called the quarterback. And those guys, if they touch the ball, let's just argue 50% of the time when they have the offense, who do you think is going to get most of the money? The left guard or the running back or the tail or the quarterback? Well, parents, it's really simple. Those two, the running back and the quarterback, get the most, and the left guard not so much. And so again, it's going through that process and understanding it. And another big factor that needs to look, and you see the numbers in here, that's really interesting. The thing called Title IX, which is that women have to have the same number of equitable scholarships as the boys. You'll notice that, like in cross country, there's 19 scholarships for cross country, but there's only 11.7 for baseball, but there's more for softball. Well, what it is to make up the number for the 85. And so some parents are getting a little confused. They're like, well, why does the girls have more? Well, it's not the girls have more. They just have to get to the same number of scholarships. And where they do, they make the adjustments is in the different other sports. When you think of cross country and track, for example, a lot of people don't get this. I learned this when I was went to a track seminar by the University of Washington. When you think of really the northern part of the United States, of the hemisphere of our country, that's really where the cross country guys are hanging out. The Montanas, the Oregons, and those spots. The Louisiana states, the Arizona states, the Texases. That's kind of the speed area. That's where the track and field people are. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy when you think about even that perspective. And I think that one of the other great things I learned at that, presentation was sometimes you have to have the numbers kind of hit you in the face. So when you think of your kid as a really good track athlete, I helped a young gal get to Carroll College a couple of years ago in two different, one was a field sport, and the other one was she was a runner, a triple jump, and then she was a runner. And I helped her get a little bit more money because she was two sports, two different, not sports, but two different things that she did for her team, which helped her get a little bit more money and put points on the scoreboard, as they say. So my point being is that if you go and you look at that, then you can do this nationally. You can see the top 100 times, the top 20 times in the 100-yard dash. Well, if you're not world-class 10-7, 10-6, 10-5, and you're 11-7, 11-8 person, and all of a sudden you look at the big sky, 11-8, 11, that's where, then that kind of helps you see where you really should fit into where you want to try to get into the scholarship. And again, probably a good time to talk about it with your situation, how you went through your evolution of where you were. You started off going to Central, and then you ended up at George Fox. And I think when you and Scotty talked about it a little while ago, it was a great part of the story. And so, love to hear more about that from your side.
Yeah, no, there's 2 points you hit on, kind of both of them that I want to touch on as well. But I'll start off with my story in terms of experiencing what the scholarship process and whatnot and everything like that. And so, I think one of the things you have to realize is that on these numbers that you have here, I know your numbers, by level they kind of go down, and the levels you go down. But the number that they say these are the numbers that they can offer, the maximum number they can offer. I think that's important. And D1, they can, it's all based on how much money they have. D1 obviously has the money for the most part, basically, to offer the max scholarships. Now, but as you go down, not every school, Division, Division II, stuff like that, don't necessarily have the money in an athletic department to fund the full amount of scholarships they are allowed to. So in my given situation, when I was at Central Washington, it's that 36 number, 35 number at Division II, that's the max they can offer. Well, the department didn't have the money to fund 35. They had the money to fund around 25. So there's already a disadvantage of, okay, I want to go to Central Washington. They can give 36 scholarships a year. Well, that's not the case. They actually can only give 25. So those things to keep in check. And that's, I experienced that. And then with that, because they have less, like you said, a piece of the cake, right? Or piece of the pie. They like to split it up, and they like to give, half scholarships or third scholarships. So, even if you're getting a scholarship, it still may cost you to attend school. And so that's kind of what I went through. And, it is, any scholarship you get is fantastic. Any kind of, whether it's academic or athletic, right? Any of those scholarships you can get is fantastic, even if it's not a full ride as well. So that just make sure we keep that important. But at the same time, I think it's good to realize and acknowledge that, your situation is not always guaranteed it's going to be a full ride if you get a scholarship, or that may be the only option. So that was my experience when it comes to scholarship opportunities. And then on the flip side, so I started at Division II, and then I transferred actually 2 more times to Division III schools, Willamette and George Fox. And the thing to note there is that when you get to Division III, there's a reason why they're not on this list right here. It's because they don't give athletic scholarships. Division III is kind of its own monster. So, but on the other hand, they do actually give it seemingly more academic scholarships. So, I think that's also something to keep in mind, that athletic scholarships ultimately aren't the end all be all to getting into college. If that's the case, you can kind of factor both athletics and use academics to kind of supplement each other, to help pay for school as well. But I had to go through that process of not getting any athletic aid when you transfer, and that's something you have to consider when you're doing that. But there are still opportunities to play sports at that level, and I'll get into more of that as we get down the road. But the other thing you kind of hit on, you mentioned track as an example, and my sister was a track and field athlete and heptathlete in college. And something you don't realize is, the big sports, football, basketball, for the most part, their whole team, especially at D1, is, basically fully supported by full rides. But that's not the case as you look through the chart right here with track. There's, 12 and 15 scholarships available. Just something for student athletes not to get discouraged. There's about 50 to 60 athletes per track team, or 100 total, right? So between men's and women's, there's usually about 100, 120 on a team. Well, only a fraction of that are actually getting scholarships. The rest of the people you see out in those programs aren't on scholarship, or maybe they're on partials, like you said, right? So I think that just makes sure is also something not to get discouraged, that if you don't get necessarily a scholarship in those other sports like track, tennis, lacrosse, all these other ones that necessarily aren't the quote unquote mainstream sports in the country today. Don't let that discourage you from still not pursuing the highest level you can or want to be at. But I think, like you said, it's also important to realize to help, kind of set your parameters of where you can likely go and whatnot, is based on your times or based on your stats, or what the kind of talks you've had with coaches and recruiters and whatnot, to kind of really figure out, where's the best fit for you to get the most out of your experience. For me, it was, I could have walked on at Division I programs if I wanted to. As a walk-on, it's not easy to get on the field, as everyone knows, right? And we'll get into that later. There's differences between a regular walk-on and a preferred walk-on. And I did have a couple preferred walk-ons to SCS schools and whatnot. But, my goal was not, some it is to be on the highest level you can and be on the team and try and play. And that's great. My goal is to try and play as many games as I can, and I was eligible for. So I went the D2, D3 route, and I was able to play in every single game, 40 games I was eligible for throughout college. So those points you mentioned are great. That's just my personal story behind kind of what you're already talking about. But those are, on top of what you said, I think other things to keep in mind, that these numbers are great to see, but the further explanation behind them. And, one thing I wanted to also, I think we can touch on here with that, in terms of like the opportunities that people have. And I think everyone thinks that Division I, they think D1 when they think of scholarships. And like this chart points out here, there's a lot of scholarships and opportunities at all levels. So just using the football example that we said, right? There's not only, but there's 129 when it comes to football, Division I FBS schools. But from there's 125 FCS, there's 169 D2, there's 250 D3, which is the level I played at, NAI 96, JUCO 65. So again, if your ultimate goal may be Division I, and that's fantastic. That was my goal when I was in college or in high school, right? I think that's a lot of people's goals. But if you don't get that scholarship or opportunity, don't be discouraged that there's not opportunities to play elsewhere. There's a lot of factors that go into whether or not you have the opportunity to play at the next level, right? Maybe it's just the year that the programs around you didn't need your position, or there's a lot of factors that go into it. We can touch later, but doesn't mean that there's not still opportunities for you to play. So just looking at these numbers right here, just the football programs, let alone other sports. There's more, right? Not every school in the country has football, but every school usually has basketball and soccer and volleyball and track and field and stuff like that. So there's even more opportunities out in those other sports as well. So just something to, again, make sure people recognize that it's not all about D1. That's a great goal to have, but there are other opportunities outside of that, which I'm sure you probably have had a lot of work with. Like you said, most people aren't going D1. There's another few hundred people that where the majority of college athletes are sit in those lower level divisions and trying to figure it out through there.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of good points that you made right there, Jake, and we'll kind of come back to them. One is the most important thing for parents to understand. Listen, Division III is, oh, my kid's going to Division III. Well, here's the inside secret. If your kid is academically good, the amount of money that you can get at Division III is better than you can get even at the Division I level. Flat out. And if you get your kid's education paid fully, I think that's an important piece to remember. I think that's the kind of the misnomer in the deal. I'd like you to speak a little bit about kind of the differences that you saw when you were at Division II, Central Washington, and then when you went to the facilities at Division III, George Fox, the differences, and tell the parents that story.
Yeah. So like you said, I think there's a misnomer around Division III, and obviously it's not in terms of facilities for the most part, in terms of like I said, for the most part, the level of play isn't on par for, let's say, D1, right? Not to say that there weren't players that I played with that couldn't have played D1 easily, right? It's just, again, at that level, there's a lot of people that love the sport, but also want to have other things in mind that they want to pursue beyond sports and set themselves up for their careers or whatever it else may be. And so they go to a level where you can focus on athletics and academics and career a little more so than what it is maybe at the higher levels. But getting into it, there's D3. There's nothing wrong with playing D3. It's not necessarily just like I said, there's a misnomer that it's bad or it's just like whatever, kind of tossed to the side in the realm. But I had my best experience at D3. I went to camps at the D1 level, the FCS level around. And you walk on campus and you take campus tours, and at the camps you kind of see some of their facilities, and you're kind of surprised because at that level you think they should be a little better than they are, and they're not. And then when I was in D2, like I said they didn't have the money necessarily for scholarships. Well, they don't have the money for scholarships. They also didn't have the money to really keep up to the highest level they could, their facilities and whatnot. And so, I felt I had better as I transferred from Central to Willamette to George Fox, so D2 to then 2 D3s. I had better facilities, better equipment, better perks, and better athletic atmosphere around the school when I got to George Fox D3 than I did at Central D2. I mean, I was pretty much a big thing is the drip, as Scotty calls it. Basically the kind of the equipment accessories you get when you become an athlete. So the shirts and shorts and sweatsuit and travel gear and whatnot. I was outfitted and everything like that. I was outfitted everything I needed to play, from cleats to gloves to all those little things, to sleeves to tights that everyone kind of sees today, right? That was all given to me at George Fox. I didn't receive anything like that except for maybe a shirt and short at Central at the time. So those kind of things right now matter to kids too. I know that it mattered to me back then. I think it's only increased since that point, the popularity of it. As you see through the recruiting pictures that these big time programs put out and the photo shoots they have and whatnot, right? It's kind of funny to see that wasn't as much of a thing back in, I say back in my day, and I just realized it's been 10 years since I was going through the recruiting process at this time of year. So, those are the changes, but the level of play, like I said, there's a lot of, including myself in that, but a lot of people that I played with and played against that could have played at the higher levels and D1 levels for sure. And, the experience, we had a great stadium, we had great lifting facilities and other facilities. And like I said, the atmosphere, in particular at George Fox, overall between men's and women's sports, we have some of the highest ranked programs in the country every year. My sister was part of a national championship track and field team. They have a national contender in women's basketball and even sports like golf and lacrosse. And our football, my year, we were ranked. The football team this year just set the program record for wins in a season and was close to the national scale. So, I felt more they cared about athletics and the experience there on top of academics, George Fox, than I did at, the D2 at Central than the experience I got there. So, I think like I said, there's a misnomer kind of around D3 that doesn't necessarily need to be there. I'm not, blind to the fact that overall across the board, it's not, the high level D1 level of play facilities, but like I said, D1 is only a small portion of what makes up the total number of opportunities at the college level. When you compare what we got at D3, again, I can't speak to all the Division III schools right across the country, but of the ones that I played against and went to, my experience was just as good, if not better, than what I'd seen at the higher levels.
That's awesome. That's great. I really appreciate you saying that, because it's important for people to hear those things, because everybody gets caught up in this D1 thing. And I'm telling you, for everybody to really think about it. I mean, Division I is great. There's nothing knock on it. That's not what we're saying, Jake or I are saying. But a Division I level is to be quite frank and honest, is a job. I mean, you're expected at a high level. Your coaches are expected at the high level to win. Can be gone in a year, 2 years if things don't go quickly, right? They say there's a 40-hour work week or 20-hour work week in the NCAA process. That 20 hours is not even close. It's really about, a couple of years ago, the Pac-12 did a study with their student athletes, and they said the average student athlete, now you got to add golf all the way down to whoever, the cross-country people, everybody was in that. It was 53 hours a week, let alone do your academics, let alone do your social life, let alone, just do life in general. So you are at a high level doing it. I'm not saying if you go down to NAI that it's not, has to do a lot of different things. So you're all asked to, there's an exchange going on here. Your athletics versus the exchange for academics versus getting free school or whatever it is. There is an exchange of services. And so that you have to be very, open-eyed to this thing. And as I like to say, a lot of times when we're on social media, do you like the sport, or do you like to be recruited? And, to what you were saying, these photo shoots and all the things that are out there, it's crazier than it's ever been. And the bottom line is, as I always like to say to kids, coach got their arms around you in the recruiting process and liking you and telling you the greatest thing ever. And then about 2 months later, when you're in their program, they're maybe saying things to you that you didn't know they were going to ever say to you. It's because they are mad at you because they want you to do something at a different, at a certain way and things like that. So you have to be very open-eyed to that process. And so, enjoy it. Enjoy the NCAA chances to get to go on recruiting trips and all those things. But it's when it's all said and done and the line has been signed and dotted, now the real work begins.
Yeah, no, and if there's one more thing I can add based on my experience that you kind of remind me of as you're going through that, as we talk about differences between D1 and 2 and 3 and whatnot, right? And I think one of the things, again, setting your parameters and realizing, do you love the sport or do you love just like the process of what's going on, right? And we both know we know people that played at all levels. I have friends in close contacts, and I've known people who've obviously like Scotty with us and Carrie and whatnot. Like the commitment level it takes to play at D1, it is a job, especially there. You get you only get a handful of weeks that you get to really go back and see your family or have off the entire year. The rest of the time, rest of the summer, the rest of the winter, even when you're not in season, you're in a different, you're in the different part of the season, really. Off season isn't really off. And so, I think that's just a reminder of, what do you really want to get out of it? I love football. Grew up in a football family, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, all either coached, played at some of the highest levels there are. So I grew up with it. It's in my blood, but I didn't want to make it necessarily my life like that. And so, you play D3, you do get a little more, you get a little more time to focus on seeing your family during the summer and during the breaks, or the little more of the college experience of hanging with friends and stuff like that. But also, a D3, it's also academics is a huge focus. So being able to really dig into academics and maybe things that around your career, try and pursue internships and stuff like that in the off season, I think is another. It's a good difference just depending on what you want to get out of it. Is something to keep in mind. But at the same time, in saying that, by no means is depending on level. Football is still college football, is still college football. There's still a big time commitment to it. So it's not like we just practice for 2 hours a day and that's it, right? When we're talking about summer camp or fall camp leading into the season, it's 6 a.m. to 9 or 10 p.m. at night. When we're in season, it's, classes, get them done in the morning. By the time 1 o'clock hits, it's meetings, it's practice. Go get something to eat, go to the training room, go get something to eat, and then come back at 8 o'clock for more meetings at night. And so, whatever level you go to, it's definitely going to be a lot of work to put in. So I want to make sure that's clear about that at all levels. But at the same time, there are some different things that you can take from the experience depending on what you want. So you just kind of reminded me of those things that I wanted to make sure I kind of hit on, having the different experiences as well.
Appreciate it. Good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on then. Let's dig in more to the recruiting process. I kind of mentioned, can't believe it's been 10 years for me, the recruiting process. And for me, it really started, I think for me, it was junior year, right? I started sophomore year thinking about, okay, what are the steps I need to take to, freshman and sophomore year, really take get to where I wanted to go. And junior year is when you can start, for me, talking to potential colleges that were recruiting you and whatnot, right? But it sounds like that process is even beginning earlier now, which is kind of shocking to me. But just explain to us when it's the recruiting process actually starting, and then also, I think it's important why it starts early, or why you need to start early.
Well, technically, through the NCAA process, it begins your junior year is when the actual recruiting process. That's the technical term. When it really begins is probably, I would argue, is 8th grade. And there's two reasons why I say this. So let's go back from the beginning. Academically, there's three parts of the process. There's the eligibility, there's recruiting, and then there's financial aid. So eligibility, number one, is, as we've mentioned before, the NCAA recruiting, the NCAA eligibility center. You have to go through them. It's if you're on a free and reduced lunch, you can get this waived, but it's $100 fee to go through there. Technically, you can start off with a free profile until you're being recruited. But you can set up a free profile. But once you're being recruited by a coach, and we'll talk more about that later, then you pay $100. Again, like I said, you can get it waived if you're on the free and reduced lunch. The new requirement is a 2.3 GPA in your core classes, not your cumulative classes. So there's two examples I want to use real quickly. Your son or daughter could have a qualifying core score, but have a lower cumulative score and still qualify. Or your son or daughter could have a great cumulative score, but be under the core score and not be qualified. And so that's really what we try to make sure parents understand the difference. And when we say core classes, we're not talking about these special high-level AP courses on it. We're talking about the math, science, English, physical science. Those are the core classes that you have to take. Any class that you have to take, number one, to even get into community college. So it's not like we're asking your son or daughter to go above and beyond. The two parts of the process that are really important to understand. The NCAA doesn't, the old days was basically by, I don't know, it's probably not the best term to use, hook, line, or crook, or whatever you got there, it could happen. So if you ended up with the 16 core classes by your junior year, you took your sophomore class, your senior year, took a bunch of courses in the summer and you made it barely, that was the way that they're saying that can't happen anymore, that you have to show a, number one, every year you've been progressing. So we try to use like I said, our know your numbers things, 4 times 4. You want to take 4 years, you want to take 4 core classes a year and become qualified that way. And again, our future shows will show more of really what those core classes are. parents, the big things that you understand, you can go through a process. And again, we're not on this show, we'll show it down later, how you can go into your high school through the NCAA Eligibility Center and look at all the core classes.
Mm-hmm.
We've mentioned before that we did a seminar a couple of years ago down in California. A high school principal came up to me and said, I love the presentation. I really appreciated what you had to say. We almost cost the kid a scholarship because we had 83 classes that we had not sent for NCAA approval. What that means is your high school has to send in their math courses, their English courses, their science classes, their whatever course, send them into the NCAA. They look at them, make sure that they seem kosher, they're a legitimate class, and then they approve them, and then it comes back to the high school. Well, that high school had not done that, and it almost cost the kid a scholarship. So, when you talk to your counselor, they say, well, we've got them in a math class. Well, you can go into this core class, look at it, and make sure it is an actual NCAA approved core class. Going back to what you said in the beginning, really the job of high school counselors is kind of basically get kids through high school, get them through. And that's kind of the back little thing on their shoulder that's just get them through. And so some counselors just like get them a more math class, so they just get them. Well, it could be a remedial math class, and it's not the NCAA core class, and then that's when we have trouble and we have problems. So that's number one. You have to meet the core class requirements. The next part is you have to meet the 2.3 GPA. So staying up on that stuff. Not all kids are, the best way to explain it, are created equal. So, my strength, one of my strengths is not math. I'm really good at geometry, not so good at algebra. So I'm a perfect example where I would say to myself, well, I need to be really good at my geometry course, make sure I've got a good higher grade, because I know next year in my algebra class, I'm going to be struggling. So again, how do we do those things? How do we come up with a plan? That's what we sit down with you with. And, to have an honest conversation. How do we get to this point that we have to do it? The second part of the way that NCAA has done it is they do a sliding scale with your SAT, ACT. Now, there's a little disclaimer. Right now, the NCAA is not requiring it just because of the pandemic. Having said that, some Division III schools would require it, and not all institutions are not requiring it. So again, you have to know that process. But right now, and there is legislation on the NCAA level to get rid of it. We could sit here and argue for about 2 hours about really why the SAT and the ACT are even needed, but that's not what we're here for. So right now, I would work from that you need an SAT, ACT score, just to have all your options open. The institution you may go to may not need it, which is great, but it may need it. So just keep that in line. So if you have a 4.0 GPA and you have to go take the SAT, you literally only need 400 points to be qualified to the NCAA standard. Well, I'm not real smart, Jake, and I've been hit in the head a couple times. I have concussions, but I'm pretty sure you get 600 points for writing my name on the SAT score. I'm qualified. I'm done. I go on my way. What they've done is then they take the NCAA score and then they move it up. As it's moving up, the GPA is going up with the lower, bigger numbers. So my point is, if you have a 2.3, you need like 1,600 on your SAT, and all of a sudden you have a kid who's basically been a C student, he or she, C, D student, and all of a sudden now you need him to do A work. And that's really hard. And again, I'm not here to. We can talk about a lot of the social issues of why SAT and ACT are should or should not be used. But the bottom line is that's really tough. So again, the academics are very important in high school. So going back to what we originally talked about, why is the 8th grade? Some of your junior high school math and English courses are NCAA approved at your junior high school, but they have to be on your high school transcript in there on the transcript to be approved. So that's important to know. So maybe you're a really good math student. Take your first 7th and 8th grade, get those in, get your English done. So you're going into high school already down, maybe 4 credits, and you just have to cruise and get to 10. which we'll talk a bit when we do talk about the shirts, the
Yep.
red shirt situation down the road here. But my point is, you can take advantage of that is the issue. So again, going into your junior high school, talking to them, can my son or daughter get an NCAA approved core class at this level that they can apply to their high school? Make sure it's on the high school transcript. That's the one that gets sent to the because every school, every college, every university has an admissions. There's little gateways, the best way to put it, to make sure that you're academically, meeting the standard to get into this university. There's the university's admissions, there's the NCAA eligibility center admissions, and then they make sure that it all seems kosher. So again, those are really important parts of the process.
Yep.
And then the part we'll talk about later and the financial aid, but really is understanding the core classes. Again, 4 times 4 classes for 4 years. If you do those things, you're going to be perfectly on time and you'll do well. But again, it can get confusing. Now, probably a good time to talk about this, and it's really important for parents to understand this. I'm a dyslexic person, so you can use your whatever, how you want to term it, your academic condition or whatever, and for your advantage or disadvantage or however it's done, and you can. But you have to have that done, number one, legally. Like, it has to be a paper process. You just can't go in your senior year and you're like 3 credits short and like, oh no, by the way, I'm this. That doesn't work. It has to be documented, and then it has to be shown as you're going through. And there may be some different qualifications in the system that then will take some of the other courses in there, and that will apply in and get you to the NCAA qualifications. That's really simple layman's term of putting it. But again, it's making sure that your academic modifications are met, number one, and number two, that they apply and they go through the NCAA process. And we can get more into that down the road.
Yeah.
But it's important for parents to know those things, because they say, hey, my kid has ADHD or is a I-9 program right now. How does that work? How do I get make sure that the NCAA has addressed those things. But then you definitely have to have the documentation, and you have to show them the process going through. And so it just can't be just out of nowhere can this come from.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great piece of advice and insight there that probably people overlook in general. I think one more thing I'd like to add is like a place to start. You mentioned counselors and the difficulties they face having to, like, their primary job is to get people through high school. But if your school has someone like this, a career or college counselor in particular, I think that would be a good place to start. I was fortunate enough, at least to help with some of the little processes of it, of having a career college counselor at my school that was had her own separate office. That was separate from the general high school counselors that were there. And she was able to give me a little insight more on, okay, here's how the process if it goes to applying or where to go for certain things. And she had a son, I believe, that played college athletics. So she had a little more insight into the process as well. And I was lucky enough to have my dad who played college athletics, and he knew all this stuff in the beginning. But if you don't have a family member, other people have gone through this process, that might be a good place to at least start. They probably have a little more knowledge into these things, since it is a little more focused for them. So if you have that at your school as a resource, that could be, it's not guaranteed that they may know everything part of the process, but it may be a good place to start to figure out where to go from that.
Well, and I think that's an important piece for us. That's where we fit in. If you don't have that in your school, call us, all of us, and vice versa. High schools and things like that, call us, and we can help you set that up so that you have somebody on your staff.
Yeah.
They don't have to be proficient. They don't have to be like know every answer to the whole thing, but they have to have just the general understanding, and I can help them through that. And so they just have the processes through. They have a worksheet to work through. They have a Division II worksheet, which is a little bit different. There's one less math, those types of things. If you have those things and you have a process set up, that's important. I've sat down with high school counselors, and then I try to start telling them things, and they're just like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Oh wow, I didn't know that. So that's how fast the process changed. If as we both know, in this world we live in, social media, about every 30 seconds you can get inundated with something. Well, it's sort of the same for the NCAA. They change constantly. And we won't again get into the weeds here right now, but they change the requirements, they change the dates, they change the dead periods, they change when you can do things, they change how college coaches can talk to you. They do all the time, and to stay up on that as a college or as a high school counselor, you don't have time. And that's what our job is. We stay up on these things and we explain, how we do it. We're not, and trust me, we're not the end all be all. We're doing a series right now through our Twitter. We're using a college football coach who's showing kids how to make proper film. No reason for me to reinvent the wheel. No reason for me to redo the graphics. I just forward it on and say, hey, defensive line, defensive end, quarterbacks, because everybody's film's a little bit different in what they're looking for. And the same thing applies. Volleyball players are going to be different from the baseball players and things like that, and the softball. How to use social media to your advantage versus your disadvantage, and make sure that you're doing the right things on social media. Those are things that we address, and we try to work with these, counselors and the parents and the student athletes to make sure that all these things are being met. That's the most important thing.
Yep, no, absolutely. And I think we can have a whole episode on social media and stuff like that as it is, right? And so obviously, we just had a big discussion. Academics and eligibility is a big key element in the recruiting process. But there are some other ones that we want to, in addition to that, kind of go over and kind of what is truth, right? What does it really mean when these things are being said, or what are some of these elements? Because there are different versions of them. There is a difference between a verbal offer and an official offer, and you have more insight into that, and we'll get into it. But let's dig into it a little bit. And the first point we kind of just touched on, but again, there's a difference, like you said. We'll just reiterate it again. There's between getting good grades throughout high school and then being considered eligible and going through the eligibility center, or the other term that I grew up knowing it as the quote unquote clearinghouse. So we just kind of went through all that, but again, just to hit on it, there is a difference between just getting good grades and getting good grades in the core classes, making sure you take the core classes, making sure you apply for the eligibility center, and the difference between getting into a school versus passing the eligibility center. Like you said, a lot of schools right now aren't requiring SAT or ACT scores submitted, but and some are. But then the eligibility center may not be, and the NCAA may not be. So those sorts of things, good to keep in mind. And the next one we want to touch on that we're really going to dig into right here is there's a differences, and you hear in the color of shirts, right? You kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. The most common shirt people know right now is the quote unquote red shirt, but I don't think a lot of people know there are 4 different types of shirts that you can get as you're being recruited, right? So Scott, walk us through each one of these, and I'll put up a little chart that we have for that to kind of explain each one. But walk us through exactly what all these shirts mean and what they come with.
Well, for us old timers, Jake, 10 years, not me. I'm really way older than that. But the red shirt, the traditional red shirt, was the years ago how it all started. They just wanted to let high school seniors become college freshmen, just kind of get them acclimated, get them on the campus, let them learn about where the bookstore is, where the cafeteria is, and all the good things, and figuring out classes. That was the traditional way of doing it, and it allowed you to build up your classes because you didn't have kids that were going to play, and the next year they would be redshirt freshmen, and then they'd have 1 year practice, and that was the traditional. It's what everybody knew them as. Then this thing started called oversigning. So which meant, because as we talked about the academics, let's just argue that, we use football all the time, but it's every sport applies. So there's usually a class would be 25 kids. Let's just argue that the 1 through 10 kids are all academically really strong, A's, B's, good SAT scores. That's good. The next crew is, not great, but they're going to be qualifying school. And then from 21 to 25, they may take a gamble on a kid academically to get into the program, to get into the university. Maybe they're short in a couple of core classes. They're trying to figure this thing out. Maybe they don't know if they're going to make it through the SAT. And so schools started doing what they do with oversigning. They'd sign 28, 29 guys, hoping out of those 9 guys, 5 would make it and 4 would just go by the wayside. And they said, hey, we couldn't recruit them because they academically fell short. Okay. So what's happening is then they would end up, they all make it 26, 27. So now you got a problem. Now you got to go back and talk to 2 kids and say, well, we like you, but we that doesn't work really well. So college got smart and said, well, we'll call them gray shirts and blue shirts, and we'll put them in this way. So red shirt, as you can see, you get a scholarship. No. Are you eligible to play? No. Are you eligible to practice? No. So what ends up happening there is you can go to the university, you pay for your first year. What they're saying is that then the next year or the next semester, you could potentially be back on the team and have an opportunity to play with them. Even though they oversigned, it was really their responsibility not to do this thing. The bottom line is they kind of keep you on the, best way to put it, I'm a fisherman, keep you on the fishing line, hold you there. And then if you can make it, you do things. Here's the inside secret, parents and student athletes. And I know this is hard for you, everybody to take in, but every year they're recruiting a new guy to fill in your position and do these things. So there in it lies what you have to really think about. Are you really in their plans? But because next year you're a year older and they got a younger kid who's 18, 19, maybe a little faster, a little stronger, a little bigger, but whatever, and they take them. And then you could add the blue shirt. Yes, you have a scholarship. No, you're eligible to play, and you can't, and you're able to practice. And again, it's the numbers game, how they use it, and then you can start the semester right after the deal. The last one is the green shirt, which is, again, going back to what we talked about when you have early enrollment, when you get your junior high school math and English courses, what allows you to have a lot of credits, and you can leave early after your first semester of your senior year in high school, which a lot of kids are doing now, especially like the quarterbacks. They get on campus a little earlier, and they're on the field. They do go through spring practice, those types of things. So again, it's another creative way to get a kid in early, and it's a lot of the models being done this way, and especially specifically in football. Unfortunately, there's a lot of what we call reclassifications going on. So they take a kid who's really a junior and they reclassify him to be a sophomore, or sometimes they actually a sophomore and they reclassify to be a junior because they get in a little faster because maybe some injuries happened early and they can get themselves in and have an opportunity to play, football in this case, or play their sport a little faster. So again, as my stepson likes to always say, and I totally agree with him. When you're in this process, you're buying carpet from carpetbaggers. They know all the terms. They all know the things. They may tell you that you're being given a shirt, but they really don't tell you the nuances of it, and specifically in how it affects you. And it's for you to look these things up. And are you willing to risk those things? Using your preferred walk-on situation, or really, I think the most important one is probably the better one to use. There's a lot of kids get caught up in the D1, right? Like we've talked earlier, Jake. Well, a lot of kids now, to give you a good example, the kid who was really good at Wyoming a year ago, wide receiver, really good wide receiver football player, ends up getting, because of the transfer portal, gets a chance and an opportunity to go to the University of Texas and play wide receiver there. He showed he was good enough to play at that higher level in the preseason games. He was really doing well. And, I'm not trying to infer anything on the University of Texas. All I'm saying is this young man found out that the University of Texas would give him a scholarship if he put himself in the transfer portal. Lo and behold, that's what he did. So again, some of your dreams to making it to the Division I can be a kind of a convoluted road to get there, but can happen. And vice versa. There's a lot of Division I big time players that are going down because of the transfer portal. And it's probably a good time to really, address this other one that not a lot of people have heard about. But in the last 2 years, Division I FBS football, we've had 450 and 400 less scholarships given to high school players in the last 2 years because of the transfer portal. That's 850 less people. And so if you really think about it, it's a trickle down effect. So it's 850 less Division I, and those guys are then pushed down to the Division II or FCS and Division II. That keeps pushing everybody down. So there's probably 850 less kids that probably were deserving a scholarship. stepson gets a lot of calls from a lot of coaches across the country. Why is my kid getting recruited? Well, it's just a numbers game. Again, using the numbers that we had in the beginning, there's only so many scholarships. Basketball is even a harder number.
Yep.
Think about it. Maybe 2 or 3 kids are leaving. They're looking for one power forward. They're looking for one shooting guard. Maybe in volleyball, they're looking for one outside hitter. And there's 9 million kids that are in there in the pool, and then they got the portal. So both of those things are kind of played in the game. And another term for a lot of parents to understand nowadays, it's called roster management. That's what the division, the college coaches are doing. They're not only managing the present team that they have, they're managing the kids that are probably leaving their program, who they can bring in through the transfer portal, and how many numbers of the high school kids can be on top of that will make their team. So it's a really interesting dichotomy we're sitting in. I don't like it personally. I do think that in college football, again, is a good example to use. If you have 850 less inventory in the Division I system, and you keep doing this portal thing where you just keep transferring, moving players around, you have 850 less kids. In a couple of years, they're not going to have enough inventory in the system to replenish what they're doing. So there is going to be a conundrum coming down the road on this whole thing. So again, parents, and it applies to all sports. Everybody can transfer to roster management. And again, the beginning numbers we showed the 85 in Division I football. You don't have to take 25 kids anymore in your freshman class. You just have to have a class, or you have to have a team of 85 scholarship players. And so they can really change and manipulate things. Maybe one year they take in. A couple of years ago, Texas State, for example, took no high school recruits. They took 25 kids in their recruiting class, and every one of them was on the portal. So it can show you where things have changed and things like that. And again, we use football a lot, but it applies to every sport. Every sport's doing it, everything. And it's just kind of a wild, wild west when it comes to the recruiting piece right now. I think there will have there's some legislation out there. I think they were talking about after the midterms, maybe even federal legislation, some things that might be changing. So we'll wait and see what happens. Again, it's like I said, to stay up on this stuff is really, really tough. But I think that there will be maybe some normalcy, not necessarily normalcy, but maybe some guardrails, some guidelines to how we're going to be able to do this, because what we're doing presently isn't a good system.
Yeah, no, there's a lot that have changed when it comes to this system, especially with the implementation of the transfer portal over the last few years. One of the things I kind of want to hit on my experience, like I was before the transfer portal. I transferred a couple times, but I was before that whole controversy started. Now it's at the lower level, so it's not really the main talk of things. One thing I kind of want to hit on, because I was a redshirt at my first stop at Central for my first freshman year, and so I gained that extra year of eligibility for my fifth year. And I think once you're in a program, I think one of the things first of all to consider is D1 down to D2 redshirts apply. Redshirts don't exist at the D3 level, so if you don't play your first year at D3, it still counts towards your eligibility. I was lucky enough to start at D2 and then have that redshirt year to play my last year. But I think also once you get in school, and we're seeing this trend actually at the D1 level, I think, is people using the redshirt to their advantage now as a student athlete to hopefully better the situation. And so we see one of the nuances to a redshirt is that you can play, although it says eligible to play, traditionally that's how it goes. And I didn't find this out until I had a buddy of mine at Willamette happen to him. He got injured and he was allowed to use a redshirt for that reason. If you play for less than a quarter of the season, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, you are still eligible to apply. If you haven't already taken it, apply for a red shirt. So if you play in 3 games in football, let's say, and then you get injured, or for whatever reason, a lot of what we see now at the D1 level is people not happy with their current situation, is they redshirt and then look to transfer. So the gray shirt, the blue shirt, the green shirt all apply to when you're just starting out in college in the recruiting process. When you get into college, the red shirt still can play a factor. We're seeing, and I don't know if I always. I think there's a lot of ways they can be used. My experience, whatever you can to better your situation for you, put yourself in the best situation possible, I think is great. I used my transfer my final year was for both academic and athletic purposes. It helped me gain, that extra redshirt year, helped me, gave me an extra reason to go an extra year and gain some more academic opportunities. But I think just one of the nuances to keep in mind that there are when it comes to the red shirt now, like you said, it's not the traditional way anymore. There's been a lot of rules put on it. It gets kind of a tricky situation. So again, where you guys come in is explaining what that means going into college. But even I'm sure you can help when student athletes are in college and maybe thinking about transferring or stuff like that after their first year, explaining those other nuances part of the process as well.
Absolutely, that's what our job is.
Let's go then to the next point we got here. Yeah, I put letters on here because that's what it used to be. I guess you've corrected me recently in saying that's not quite the case anymore, but I'm still gonna go with it because you see, traditionally you see all the people getting, over the years, people getting the mail in letters and the tables full of letters of offers and just general letters from schools and programs that are recruiting them supposedly and whatnot. So, and I got plenty of these too, but um, explain to us, and I can, from my experience, kind of going on as well. What is the difference between like a general letter or a general conversation or discussion or email or whatever, a DM, a general kind of one versus what a more direct conversation letter DM that coaches and recruiters are having with kids and their
But
families.
Well, like you said, I mean, let's we call it the recruiting funnel. And let's be honest. I mean, a stamp is 48 cents these days. I mean, it's easy to just put out mass mailings. They have, these major universities have these big budgets where they have their postage. It's all paid for, right? 500 out in the state of Washington, send them all out. Great. The job of a recruiter is to as quick as they can, get down to a manageable list of kids that they really think that are, eligible to be able to play at their level for wherever position and things like that.
Yep.
That's number one. So they're going as fast as they can. They initially have to put out every feeler to every kid that's on the list. So that starts off with the thing. Now we have social media. We have Twitter accounts. The one thing the NCAA is kind of weird about certain things, they have real restrictions. Twitter's not quite there, and we're going to stay away from the Elon Musk conversation we could have. We're not going to do the verified, all that kind of stuff, but it's definitely out there. So there's Twitter, and so I would argue today with a lot of parents want to say, "Oh, my kid's being recruited." I said, "Okay, have you been direct messaged from that coach?" Well, no, he's on his Twitter account. Well, that's sort of the same thing. The same thing kind of lies with the general letters versus direct letters. If you're not getting handwritten notes, if you're not being followed by that coach specifically, if you're not being DM'd, that's a lot of ways these coaches can talk to players within the NCAA parameters, dead periods, all these types of things. If the student athlete reaches out to the coach then can reach back out to him, but they can't reach out to the student athlete. So those are some things getting around the rules. I did a basketball. I was an athletic director many years ago, and I went down to Las Vegas for the AAU basketball tournament. And there's a thing called the bump rule in basketball, which literally means if Jake and I saw each other, and if we bumped into each other, we could literally talk to each other. That's the only way we could talk to each other. Well, at your AAU basketball tournament, there's 12 doors across the end of the gym to get out of the gym, but there only happens to be one door open at that gym. And guess who's sitting over by that door?
Yep.
Coach K of Duke, Coach Self of Kansas, Coach, whatever who's who of the coaches. They're sitting by that one door, Coach View of Gonzaga. And the big 7-footer comes walking through. There's only one door to get through. So he's going to walk through that door, and every coach is over there, and they bump into him, and now they can start talking to him. So it's sort of the same phenomenon of how the rules work around. So again, Twitter has not been regulated by the NCAA. There's some things they can and can't do. So DMing's the thing. The really big thing that I want people to understand, it's called a committable offer. And they really have to understand this. So we always like to say in the process, I've been offered, and you may have been given an offer by that university or that college. There's no doubt about it. But what a recruiter will do to you really quickly is say, okay, let's call that coach right now and say, Coach, I want to commit right now. And then you'll find out the truth of where you're sit with that situation. They'll go, hey, wait, we don't really want to commit quite yet to you. We've got a few more to look through and process and go through this thing. Or they'll say, yeah, let's do it. Let's get it done tonight. And then that's a committable offer, and that's a big difference in the process. And again, it's easy to put out the easy stuff we can do now, especially on social media. I mean, these kids, announcement parties, the hat parties,
Yep.
all the stuff that's out there that we can do these things. Bottom line, it's a committable offer. That's what you want to hear. Is it committable? If I say yes today, will you say yes back to me? And it's a marriage. It's a two-way street. It goes back and forth, this situation, and you have to know that part of the process. And it's a good time to probably talk about this, especially with the transfer portal. A lot of people say, well, kids should have the opportunity to leave if the coach leaves and things like that. Totally agree. Don't disagree with that. Here's where I really think the parents and the student athletes always need to think about when you do this process. If your sport leaves you, either through your injury, just your desire, you didn't want to play the sport anymore, whatever. Your coach leaves, your assistant coach leaves. Is that why you're going to the university, or can you really see yourself on this school if all those things are taken away, if all your athletics are taken away, all your camaraderie, all the things that you went there for was taken away? Could you see yourself in that university at that school? That's an important part of this process that parents and student athletes need to ask themselves, and I don't think a lot of them do. Because you're a perfect example. Ellensburg, Washington, is totally different from the outskirts of Portland. I mean, it's two different worlds. You're kind of near the urban situation. The other rural. You got to get over those mountains when you want to go home. I mean, it's a different situation. So really ask yourselves those questions. And that's why I always say, like, the 500-mile rule, with every single level of division you can put on there. And again, some of that other question, if I left my sport left me, would I be able to see myself at on this campus to be able to hear and go to school? Do I like this place? And a lot of people, again, the recruiting process is really, they love it. You get to go to all the nice restaurants. They treat you really, really, really well. Everything's good. But all of a sudden, that all leaves you, and now you're stuck at that university. And you're like, I don't really like this place, and you leave. And then, really, the ultimate goal, really, what we always say to our student athletes that we work with, get the degree, get that degree before use the sport before the sport uses you. So it's a great opportunity to get a chance to have your education paid for, partially paid for, a little bit paid for, doesn't really matter. And still sport you love.
Yeah, no, that was a large part of my experience as well. I think, again, my advice to college or potential college athletes, high schoolers out there is, as you go into this process, set your parameters. There's so much information, so many possibilities that you can have to sort through this process, and it's not an easy process for anyone, for any sport. And by setting your parameters, for me, it was wanting to play at the highest level, but playing as many late games as I can, right? Not just be on a team. Not there's anything wrong with whatever you choose, but that was what I chose. I wanted to be within a certain distance geographically from my family so they could watch, things like that. And I wanted to make sure that the school, like you said, beyond sports, beyond athletics, that the academic and career opportunities aligned with what I wanted to do after school was over. And so once I kind of set those parameters, it made the process a lot easier for me to kind of pick the schools and what I went to. And obviously I transferred for different reasons, changing circumstances, and academics being one of those ultimately in the end. But like you said, all those other factors beyond the sport itself played a part in it. My last year I transferred, potentially, I was going to be on the team at George Fox, right? But it wasn't a guarantee that I'd necessarily start or play or whatnot. But, a large part of my decision was not just athletics, but it was academics and the career opportunities that I saw that George Fox had. My sister was going there as a freshman the year before I transferred. I saw everything that they had, and I wasn't getting necessarily the same level of opportunities at my current school at the time, academically and career-wise. And I'm like, well, if things don't work, I'm going to give my best shot at football. But if for some reason things don't work out, I know after the fact that academically this is going to set me up better for what I want to do, give me better career opportunities after school. And so, I can't second any more of what you said enough of, if the sport leaves you, if you lose the sport, are you in a good situation? Are you in a place you want to be? Like you said, Ellensburg or, Portland or something like that, right? In the spot you want to be, and you set up for success in the career you want to be in academically as well. So I
Well,
think that's
I think
huge.
I think it's also important for parents in the student athletes to hear this too. Jake, what is your degree in?
My degree, I have a BA in economics and a minor in marketing.
Yeah, but it's sports management is what you did. And what do you do today?
Basically, yeah. Yep.
You work in sports management. And so I mean that's the paramount of the whole situation. I mean, you can have what you want, you can get what you want out of this whole situation if you work it right. That's the most important message that these parents and all these kids need to hear. Because I know, and again, everybody's got the idea they're going to the pros, but not, it's the numbers are against you. And I'm not a dream dasher by any stretch of the imagination. I want you to live to your fullest, do exactly what you want to do. But at the end of the day, get your degree because we all hang them up sooner or later. Me sooner, you a little later. And that's the way life goes. But I think it's the most important
Yeah,
thing.
I think there's a part where you have to be a little, honest with yourself of what you want out of it and what's possible. And getting back to the whole letters thing, right? I had letters from all over the country. I had letters, technically speaking, from Cal and from Missouri, and all over the country, right? Were they legitimate like letters of recruiting me? No, they were, like you said, they were the general envelope letters that they just stick a stamp on, and they had your name somehow through a database or whatever, and they just sent it out, right? I knew I wasn't going to Missouri being recruited by them. I wasn't, Cal. They sent me a letter for their camp. They just want my money to come down there. Was I really being recruited by them? Probably not, but but the letters I did get, I got from, obviously the schools I ended up going to, Central and the D3 schools around here, such as George Fox and Linfield and whatnot, but also, the University of Montana. I had handwritten letters from, like you said, what actually counts. I had handwritten letters from the coach at Harvard. So I had opportunities to go out to the Ivy League as well. So those are the ones that were legitimate, that I knew the difference between those and maybe all the other ones that were on my table. So I just think it's like you said, it's important to keep in mind and be honest with yourself and be realistic of what your possibilities are out there, and keeping make your dreams as big as you can, but also don't set yourself up for failure by thinking that there are more opportunities out there than necessarily are. Everyone thinks they're being recruited by the the SEC or the Pac-12 or whatever, and that's not necessarily the case. And that kind of goes to this next point here, which we touched on a little bit. Those last 2 points, unofficial versus official visits. And, you touched on it earlier, but maybe you can explain why they give these verbal offers and stuff like that. But just, explain to us these last two points right here. Was it unofficial versus official visit? And what is, why do they give verbal offers and versus official or committable offers?
Yeah. So the number one thing is we'll start with the unofficial and official weekend visit. Unofficial, going back then to the beginning, I think it's the most important to understand. You only get this one time in your life to be recruited to play college athletics. So take advantage of it. Have fun with it. Everybody gets you up to 5 visits per the NCAA rules of official visits. I would argue that you should take all 5 of them, number one, so you can see apples to oranges, what you did and didn't like, and all those things. Okay, there's that. I think the other part, unofficial, can be really, really good for you because number one, you can, if you wanted to, let's just argue you got in the car and you started in Seattle, Washington, and you hit the University of Washington first. And then you went down to POU, and you went down to UPS, and then you went down to, you just keep working your way down all the way to I-5 and, George Fox, and even went down to Western Oregon, even went down to Linfield, went all the way to even Southern Oregon, and came back. You went from the top level to the bottom level. You saw the difference in facilities. You saw the difference in the size of campuses,
Yep.
where places are at. And I think that's a really important thing to do. You can make even, and as you're coming back up, flip yourself to the right side of the mountains and go through Central. So you've gone D2, you've done them all. And I think that's really important. Then you do that. And then you get offered an official trip. An official trip means that you are, everything's paid for when you go down. Everything from your travel, the food, any fun things you get to do while you're there. It's all taken care of by the university. Unofficial means that you come in. It's all on your own dime. You pay for it. Now, when you get there, you walk in. They maybe give you there's a pop or something. They'll hand it to you or that kind of thing. That's one thing. But you financially paid for it to yourself to get there. But I think it's an important part of the process for you to go do. I think it's really, really important for you to take advantage of that. And then the official visits, you put it in. The NCAA approves of it. You get to come. You have to have your essay. You have to have be registered with the eligibility center. Number one. And number two, the old days you had to have an SAT score. Didn't have to be qualified yet. You just had to have a score. That is, I think, put on the back burner. But your institution that you specifically work with would tell you ahead of time, and you would know that. So then you go to the university. You go to the place. They take you on all different tours. They take you on an academic tour. They take you on a tour through the facilities, through the what the campus looks like, what housing looks like for the students. And all those things. And it's a great time for your parents and for you to see it officially. And again, you get a little higher level. You get to, meet probably professors. You get to really, maybe dive in specifically to the what you want to get your degree in, if it's the history department, if it's the econ department, whatever it is.
Yep.
You get a little more versus if it's unofficial, you'd have to go knocking on doors, things like that. I will tell you this too. The one thing about unofficials is really important for people to think back in the back of their mind. The way you get traded on an unofficial will tell you a lot. If you can set ahead on, okay, I'm going to be in your school next Saturday, blah blah blah, and they say, well, nobody will be around here. That kind of tells you where you sit with their process, where you're at.
Yeah.
Hey, what time you can be by? Okay, great. We'll have somebody here. Okay. Or if you just literally walk in the doors and they all jump up and they try to run around and get something done and make sure you get taken care of, seen, and do those things. That's important. Versus you come in, everything is locked, the doors are locked, and nothing. And that kind of tells you, those are signs that tell you where you are sitting in the process.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I went through a similar experience when I was going through it. Was a couple of things there. There were a couple schools in the Northwest. I won't name names, but I was pretty much at the D3 level, recruited by all of them. And there were a couple I was saying, hey, I'm going to go down. Like you said, it's important to go to all the places you can, right? Unofficially. And so I said, hey, coach, I'm going to be down here. Or he first said, hey, let us know if you ever come down here. We'll walk you around, whatever. Okay, cool. Told him that, texted him. He said, okay, great. We'll see you. Let us know when you get here. Got there, texted him, and no response. And I was like, okay. Yep. Just like kind of the example you were saying. And then on the other hand, I had, I put on here weekends, but also events. I had Washington State gave me free tickets to their game against Oregon when they played up in Seattle a long time ago. And does the fact that I got tickets from Washington State or that I went to an unofficial visit, like you said, meaning I'm really being recruited by them and I'm going to have like potentially get an offer for them? Or is it a way of them just kind of like you said earlier in the show of shrinking down their prospects that they have, So I think it's important to, official that they're really looking at you, but unofficial, you really got to sometimes take it with a grain of salt of what's really going on. Like you said, are they making time out for you if you come on unofficial, or is it just there, you're just kind of going there by yourself? Or if they have an unofficial weekend, there's 50 guys or 100 people that show up. Does that mean they're all being recruited? Who knows? Yeah. So just, keep those things in mind, keep it in perspective. Like you said, go on as many official trips as you can, go on as many unofficial trips to just get a lay of the land, figure out what feels right and whatnot. And like you said as well, but I'll reiterate for Scott Laigo, who, a while ago on the Atavus Football show said he wished one of the things he would have done. He played at UW. He wished he would have taken all the visits he had instead of just taking the two. So very good points right there. The last point real quick, you touched on it earlier, but what, we hear about everyone's being offered. You have people in second grade being offered scholarships, supposedly, right? What is the difference between, you see a difference, obviously, verbal They say they'll offer you official, is that committable offer, hopefully that you can actually sign the piece of paper and commit to. But why do they give verbal offers? Like what is the, why is their distinction between verbal and official? You know what I mean? I'm sure that's for the people to kind of understand that there is a difference, but why, the reading between the lines of what coaches do and say, why are they offering, verbals?
So if we go back to what we originally started this whole thing on, know your numbers.
Yep.
Every class, every school, again, using the number 25. And I know I talked about roster management and everybody can, but you can have up to 25 kids in your class. But it's the easiest way to explain so people know what's going on. Let's just argue each school knows they're down to their 23rd guy. They both have two classes with 23 kids in them. And now they're 24 and 25 are waiting in. They're trying to figure it out. Let's argue that school X and school Y are going against each other, and they're basically got 4 players that they're looking at trying to get in the system. So they sometimes use these techniques or ways of doing these things to try to force your hand, to force you to sign that kid because they came into your state and said they offered a kid, and so then you offer them. That's great, and they really are kind of diversion attack, and they're really trying to go back and get the player that they really want. So there's, again, you're kind of a pawn in the system. That's really what you understand. And again, parents really have to understand. I think this is a really huge thing here. And I used it one time when I was at Garfield. I told our Garfield kids from 26th to 32nd Street, from Jackson to Yesler, you might be the best football player in the city of Seattle. Hands down. You might. There's no doubt about it. The problem is you are now competing in football is another new phenomenon with a lot of the German kids and Australian rules kickers and the Tongan and Samoan communities involved in the recruiting. You're recruiting against the world.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden that's what you have to understand. And there's no science to this. I mean, we think we have these scientific parameters we use. We want a certain size, height, weight, blah blah blah. But sometimes they're like, well, I think I like this guy a little bit better. And you have to also understand how it works with assistant coaches. And again, it's easier to use football because it's a visual, for parents.
Yep.
But the same thing with a small staff of 3 basketball coaches. What ends up happening, those assistant coaches, they're trying to do whatever they can to get their guys that they put up to the table to be recruited. So you're fighting coaches inside their own rooms that are trying to fight with each other to get their guy to be the one that's on the table so that they could say, I had 5 guys out of this class of 25 and things like that. Those, is it imperfect? Is it the right way to do it? Is it we can argue those things separately, but it's the truth to the matter. So when you're talking about verbal versus official offer, again, it can be used vice versa the other way.
Exactly.
You may want to play really, really bad, and you say to them, "Okay, let's make that call right now. Let's see if it's committable." And they call and they say, we're waiting. And then that kid will say, you know what, I'm going to go to you because you're the one who wanted me right here, right now. And so those 2 ways of going about this process, and you just have to understand, and you have to have those things in the back of your head and really looked at. I mean, again, the anomalies, the top 2%, the kids that are just, academically right, physically right, all those things, those guys are on another plateau. They're going to go anywhere they want because of who they are. It's the other 98% that are fighting for those positions and those things, and that's what parents really don't understand. And basketball is even probably worse than football. I mean, think about all the European players that are coming over taking scholarships, and Australian basketball players, and all the things. So parents just don't make it look like it's the from Hawaii over to the corner of New Hampshire. That's the only places that are recruiting your kids. It's everywhere. It's all around the world. The internet is a valuable thing. When you use social media, make sure you're doing it right. Make sure you have a correct name, a really good email. Your height and weight are there. You have your huddle. One of the factors that everybody's looking for is, I'm working with a kid right now from Africa. He's reached out through our website, and verifiable information. Are you really 6'2"? Are you really 190 pounds? Are you really a 4'6" guy? I mean, it's easy for you, me, Scotty, and Kellen, we could all lie about a lot of things when we're sitting around the dinner table, right? Well,
Yeah.
I used to run this and I used to do that, until we have to put the barbell, in our hands, and we got to, lift 225, 35 times because we said we could do it. And, the barbell crushes on our chest after two. So my point being is make sure the information you have is verifiable and it's right, because those coaches will do their investigation. They will know if it's verifiable. And, I've seen it many, many times when, kids says, oh, he's 6'2", and you come walking in, you're a 5'11", college coach, and you're looking down at him and you're like, I'm 5'11", you said you were 6'2", and I'm looking down at you right now, and you're a 5'9", 260 guy, but you're not 6'2", 260, and that's a big difference. And so, unfortunately, in the system, the way we work, those numbers really do count in this system, So it's important for parents to know those things. So really, it's two parts to the system. One is used to manipulate some situations, and two, it's really to kind of make you stay out there and know that they may have you still waiting to hear. But again, I've seen that too. I've seen a lot of people say, I'm going to go Division One, I'm going to go Division One, and then they don't get it, and then they call back to Eastern Washington, hey man, is that scholarship available? And the Eastern Washington coach says, it's full, we're done. And the kid gets left out, and now they're really fishing and trying to find someplace to go. So parents, it's a numbers game that you just really want to play. So if you get an offer, I would highly consider it and making sure that it happens.
Yep. No, especially if you have a verbal offer, you're not the only one. There's, like you said, they can bring 25 in a football, but they've probably given 100 verbal offers. And then, they know people are going to commit somewhere else and dwindle their list down. And as soon as they give it to you, they can also take it away. But again, it's a two-way street. If you commit somewhere and you get a better offer later on, before you have to sign that piece of paper, you have the right to do so as well. So, but again, once you sign that, once you get the committable offer, like you said, seriously consider it and taking it, because there aren't many out there. Especially there's even a lesser amount today than there was 5-10 years ago. So,
Absolutely.
a lot of great information. Glad we could kind of go through all that. To wrap it up, again, thank you, Scott, again, for being on here. We've gone through a lot, and we're going to have plenty more episodes to really dive into the weeds, like you said, when it comes to, financial aid and maybe social media and some other of these topics that all are part of the recruiting process and in college athletics in general. And so we're going to dig into that over the next few episodes that we come out with this. But again, as an intro episode, Scott, again, works with and founded the Student Athlete Advocates, does a great job helping athletes, not just really get scholarships, but just really explain to them what the process is when it comes to recruiting and how to be recruited and everything that comes along with that process. And really just providing the information and insight that's necessary to really understand how things work. So to wrap it up, Scott, thank you again. But can you give everyone who's watching we have your logo, a little bit of information displayed here, but how can they contact you for those that are interested in learning more, or high school athletes and families that want to pursue college athletics?
Well, number one, you just go on our website, which is on air student athlete, saadvocates.org. We do have an emails option there. Email me directly. You can get on Twitter, Instagram, DM us from there. Anytime, and there's, obviously, I know these young people are smart enough to figure out any way to get a hold of me. So that part is the easy part for the deal. But the easiest way for a parent is go on our website, do it that way. But number one, the most important, especially with our social media, we provide a lot of information on there. We're constantly updating the things like that. If you decided to try to do this on your own, but we'd really love to, at least have an initial conversation with you, sit down with you, and kind of explain the whole process, and kind of, allow you at least to have the tools to be successful in this process. It can be very daunting, as we've done an hour and a half. You can get caught in a whirlwind really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely. Yep. No, for sure. That's a great resource to have. And like we said, we're going to be coming out with more episodes with Scott to dive into the details of the whole process that you need more than just one episode to go into. So Scott, thank you for being here. Glad to have you. Looking forward to more episodes going into this whole recruiting process, again, diving into the weeds. For those who are watching, if you enjoyed the video, if you got something out of it, learned some more information that you may not have known before, please like the video, subscribe to our channel so you can get updates and notifications on our upcoming videos, get more information about the recruiting process and kind of some insights and examples of that as we move forward in the year. Thank you all for watching. Scott, again, I can't thank you enough for being here. Glad to have you on. Until next time, we're out.
Thank you.